We begin this hour with the latest out of Venezuela. Pressure continues to mount on Nicolas Maduro to step down. This as the U.S. pushes ahead with more sanctions and rallies the allies to force regime change in that embattled country. Meantime, along Venezuela's border with Brazil and Colombia, clashes have resulted in at least 5 deaths and hundreds of people injured. For the past few days, we've had our very own Dan Cohen on the ground covering the conflict. He's joining us in studio now. Dan, you literally just got off the plane, a little while ago. I'm glad you made it back safely. First, tell us about your assignment. Tell us what you learned, what you saw.
Well, yesterday, the Vice President of the U.S., Mike Pence, met with the Lima Group in Bogota, Colombia, the capital, and I was there. And Pence and Juan Guaido, the self-declared interim president of Venezuela, have been saying all options are on the table, a thinly veiled reference to military force for Venezuela to oust Maduro. But much of the Lima Group, somewhat to surprise, rejected military force, saying that this is not an option, as did the EU diplomatic spokesperson Federica Mogherini. So it seems at this point that military force is not an option to oust Maduro. And so the strategy, from what I have learned on the ground in Colombia, is rather that they are seeking a military coup. So Pence announced more sanctions on Venezuela yesterday, and there's been hyper-focus in media on the defecting Venezuelan soldiers who have come over to the Colombian side, one of which I even interviewed yesterday. And so sanctions are, basically the idea is sanctions will pressure the society pressures the military, and then the military flips, and Maduro's out. Now, whether that happens remains to be seen, but at this point, military intervention seems to be off the table. Now, one of the most fascinating moments for me in Colombia, was at the Tienditas bridge crossing, which we've heard so much about. I spoke to a priest, a Colombian priest, who works with the defecting Venezuelan soldiers, and take a listen to what he had to say.
This is really a pedagogical humanitarian aid, and what we really want is for the population to rise up. And when the tiny bit of humanitarian aid enters in this pedagogical way, the political death of the usurper president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, happens.
So what he's saying is this humanitarian aid that the U.S. was trying to deliver into Venezuela is not about humanitarianism or human rights or democracy, but it's actually about creating what he called the political death of Nicolas Maduro. And then he said that once the political death of Maduro happens, then the Venezuelan society will transition from socialism to capitalism, and there will be an internal clash in society and what he called the civil resistance over a few years, but eventually the capitalist system will be installed. So
this is kind of like the long game, a very drawn out. So do you think that the U.S. was originally hoping? We saw John Bolton with his notepad gaffe with the scribble of 5,000 troops to Colombia. That's obviously nixed then, because the Lima Group says, no, we don't want U.S. soldiers in our backyard.
Well, at least for now, I just don't think the regional allies understand that if there is a military intervention, it's going to totally destabilize the country. You're going to have even more refugees going into Colombia, going into Brazil. A top Brazilian general rejected military intervention, and this is, when now we have President Jair Bolsonaro, who is very much aligned with the United States. So this general seems to be even pushing back against the president of Brazil.
Interesting. Okay, so you said you talked to a lot of people on the ground, regular civilians as well, that aren't priests. What are some of the civilians saying? And Colombians, Venezuelans?
Well, in Cucuta, which is the city on the Colombian side of the border, where this humanitarian aid, so-called, was staged, there are a lot of impoverished Venezuelans who thought maybe it would be better in Colombia. And I met so many who were begging on the streets. I met a pregnant woman with 2 little kids who thought, maybe she'd have a better shot over there. And really, there is a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, but there's also one in Colombia, and there's no humanitarian aid for them. Just a few days ago, in the Chocó region of Colombia, 7,000 Afro-Colombians lost their homes due to massive floods, but there's no humanitarian aid for them. So a lot of people were really wondering, well, why is this humanitarian aid being forced into Venezuela while there's huge amounts of suffering in Colombia? Exactly.
Right. So if this aid's being rejected at the border there, why not pass it along, if it truly is aid, pass it along to some of the people in Colombia? It's in Colombia.
Exactly.
Already.
Exactly. But as we saw the priest explain, that it's not really about humanitarian aid. It's about, transitioning Venezuela into kind of the West's favored economic system.
All right, Dan, I know there's a lot more to discuss here, and I believe you're going to produce some other stuff that we're all anxiously waiting to see. Lots of footage. You were there several days. Thank you so much. We're so glad to have you back and back here safely.
Thanks,
Dan Cohen, thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.